Please welcome Detective Shiela Geathers.
By the time this investigation reached its breaking point, New York City was already living in fear of a man who executed couples in darkness and left their bodies posed beside handwritten notes as if their murders were some kind of twisted sermon. 4 victims were already dead. 2 men had their skulls blown apart at point-blank range so violently that fragments of bone and brain matter were sprayed across park grounds, while the women beside them survived long enough to watch the killings before they themselves were shot through the face and left bleeding into the dirt. The killer stayed beside the bodies afterward. He touched them, rearranged them, positioned their limbs while blood was still pumping out of their wounds. Then he calmly left notes beside the corpses, blaming the victims for naughty things before disappearing back into the city. Detective Geathers, when did you finally realize this was not simply a murderer stalking couples, but a predator studying human behavior like prey before slaughtering them?
I realized it the moment I stopped looking at the notes and started looking at the blood. That was where the truth really was. The killer wanted everyone focused on morality, affairs, religion, shame, and secret relationships. Meanwhile, the actual crime scenes kept telling a much darker story. Every victim died almost the exact same way. The men were neutralized first with catastrophic gunshots to the head, delivered at such close range that powder burns blackened the skin around the wounds before the bullets tore through bone and exited out the backs of their skulls. The women died seconds later after witnessing the executions beside them. Blood evidence from both scenes proved that. The female victims collapsed toward the men after the first shots, meaning they were alive long enough to understand what they had just seen before the gun was redirected toward them. That detail never stopped disturbing me. The killer wanted them conscious for that moment. He wanted them to see death arrive before it reached them too. At the second scene in Prospect Park, the female victim's jaw had been shattered apart by the first round. Blood poured from her mouth and throat, heavily enough to soak through the ground beneath her before the second shot finished her. The medical examiner later confirmed she likely remained alive for several seconds after the first impact because of the blood flow pattern around her body and the tissue aspirated into her airway. She was breathing blood while lying beside the man already dead next to her. That is the kind of horror that stays inside investigators. And the killer stood there through all of it. That was the detail, poisoning the entire case psychologically. He remained beside fresh bodies long enough to arrange them after death. He touched them while blood was still running from their wounds. At the first murder scene in Central Park, the male victim's arm had been repositioned across his chest. At the second scene, the female victim's legs were adjusted after death. Those actions require calm. They require patience. They require someone emotionally comfortable standing inches away from catastrophic violence. Most killers flee from blood. This one settled into it. The task force was exhausted by then. Detectives were reviewing photographs of exploded skulls and destroyed faces for hours every night searching for patterns. Patrol units flooded parks after midnight. Panic spread through the city because nobody understood how the killer selected his victims. There was still no personal connection between either couple. Different boroughs, different professions, different lives. The only overlap was secrecy. Both couples were involved in hidden relationships and meeting privately in isolated places. The killer was finding them somehow. That realization made every dark section of the city feel dangerous. Every parked car near a park, every isolated bench, every walking path hidden beneath trees, every couple sitting together after midnight suddenly looked vulnerable. because by then I understood something terrifying. The killer was watching first. The murders did not begin with the shootings. They began with observation. That realization finally broke open through the tip line. At first, the call sounded insignificant. No eyewitness, no confession, no dramatic revelation. Just a frightened voice reacting to the wording from the handwritten notes left beside the bodies. They were doing naughty things. The caller said they had heard that phrase repeatedly before. That got my attention immediately, because by then, the wording itself had become psychologically important to the investigation. It sounded childish until placed beside bodies with their heads destroyed by gunfire. The contrast between the language and the gore surrounding the victims made the scenes feel even more disturbing. The killer reduced slaughter into moral correction. The caller explained they had heard the phrase many times during conversations after church gatherings, not during sermons, casual discussions afterward. That detail mattered because people reveal their genuine beliefs more openly in conversation than performance. The caller sounded terrified. There were long pauses between answers. Breathing changed every time they spoke about him directly. Fear like that matters because it tells you somebody already believes the violence is possible before police ever confirm it. The caller described a man who watched people obsessively, not casually looking at faces the way strangers do in public places, watching behavior, watching interactions, watching physical contact between couples, watching the exact moment people relaxed enough to stop guarding themselves in public. That detail hit me immediately because it mirrored every murder scene. The victims were killed during private moments, exposed in public places. The caller described him sitting alone after church functions instead of socializing normally. Quiet, observing, watching married couples carefully, watching the way people touched each other when they believed nobody noticed. The caller finally used the word that changed the entire emotional direction of the case: judging. That was what he was doing. Judging people silently before selecting them. At that point, the murders became even darker psychologically because the notes no longer looked like stage distractions. They looked like justification. The killer believed the victims deserved what happened to them. And killers who believe they are morally right rarely stop willingly.
So now the murders are no longer random acts of violence. You are looking at a man secretly observing strangers, studying hidden relationships, judging behavior, and deciding who deserves to die before calmly blowing apart their skulls in public parks.
It became real the moment the caller finally stopped protecting him. Up until then, we were still chasing psychology, movement, patterns, and fear. But there was a point during that conversation where the caller went silent after hearing details from the second murder scene. Long silence. The kind where you can hear somebody deciding whether speaking aloud will place them in danger too. Then the caller quietly said something that changed the entire investigation. "It has to be him." There was fear in the voice immediately afterward. Real fear. The kind that told me the violence already made sense to them before they ever said the name. We asked who they meant. Another pause. Then they gave us the name, George Hende. Everything accelerated after that. George Hende was deeply religious publicly, isolated privately, and worked maintenance jobs that allowed him to move through the city late at night without attracting attention. No wife, no children, no close relationships, quiet demeanor. But once we began digging deeper, the background became increasingly disturbing. Complaints from church members about obsessive conversations involving morality and sinful behavior. Reports of him watching couples during gatherings instead of participating socially. Incidents where women reported feeling uncomfortable because he stared too intensely at physical affection between people. Then we found the notebook. That notebook changed the case from terrifying to monstrous. Inside were pages filled with observations about strangers. Not names initially, behavior. Woman touching married man's leg near fountain. Couple kissing behind trees after midnight. Man lying to wife on phone. He was cataloging people, studying them, judging them, and some entries matched the murdered victims exactly. One description referenced the second female victim weeks before she died, including the scarf she wore the night she was executed in Prospect Park. Another entry described the first male victim arguing quietly on a phone near Central Park days before the murders. That was the moment we understood. The killing started long before the gunshots. The victims had been watched for days or weeks beforehand, while living ordinary lives completely unaware someone nearby had already marked them for death. That realization infected the entire task force psychologically, because it meant George Hinda was moving invisibly through the city studying people while deciding privately whether they deserved execution. And the final page of the notebook contained something that made the blood in my body feel cold the second I read it. Another park location, another date, another couple described in detail, which meant while we were still standing over the blood and shattered skulls from 4 murders, George Hinda was already preparing to create 2 more bodies.
Thank you for watching this episode of the case file of Shiela Geathers. We invite you to join us for another exciting episode in the coming days. Have a good night.